Welcome to Unit 2, Lesson 23, Solving Problems with Inequalities in Two Variables. Our learning goal for this lesson is to practice writing, interpreting, and graphing solutions to inequalities in two variables. We have two learning targets for this lesson. Learning target number 1 is for you to feel comfortable saying, I can use graphing technology to find the solution to a two-variable inequality. Learning target number 2 is for you to feel comfortable saying, when given inequalities, graphs, and descriptions that represent the constraints in a situation, I can connect the different representations and interpret them in terms of the situation. Our first practice problem. This year, students in the 9th grade are collecting dimes and quarters for a school fundraiser. They are trying to collect more money than the students who were in the 9th grade last year. The students in 9th grade last year collected $143.88. Using D to represent the number of dimes collected and Q to represent the number of quarters, which statement best represents this situation? So as we break down this word problem, the first thing I want you to notice is it says collect more money than the students. If we see more, that means greater than. It cannot be less than. It cannot be equal to. It must be greater than. So that means we can get rid of choice A and we can get rid of choice B. So now the choice is between C and D because they both correctly have a greater than symbol. But now we need to pay attention to what number is matched up with what variable. So what we need to remember is that dimes are worth 10 cents and that quarters are worth 25 cents. So we should see the 0.10 paired up with D for dimes, and we should see 0.25 paired up with Q for quarters, and we see that correctly done on choice D. Choice C pairs the wrong variable with the wrong number. If you have any questions about how to solve this practice problem, please use class time to ask for further clarification before we move forward. Our next practice problem says, a farmer is creating a budget for planting soybeans and wheat. Planting soybeans costs $200 per acre and planting wheat costs $500 per acre. He wants to spend no more than $100,000 planting soybeans and wheat. Number 1, write an inequality to describe the constraints. Specify what each variable represents. So the first variable that I would use in number 1 is S, and that's going to represent acres of soybeans. The second variable I'm going to use is going to be W, and that is going to represent acres of wheat. Now, as we look at this, we can see that soybeans cost $200 per acre. So in our inequality, we would pair 200 with S. We'll multiply $200 times every acre of soybeans that he plants. Next, we can see that wheat costs $500 per acre. So we would pair 500 with W, and that tells us we would multiply $500 times every acre of wheat. We can see that he wants to spend no more than $100,000. So no more than means that it could be less than $100,000, or it could be exactly $100,000. And finally, it says they want to spend that planting soybeans and wheat, so we would add these two together. Now we have our inequality. For number 2, they want us to name one solution to the inequality and explain what it represents in that situation. So you could come up with any solution as long as it made the inequality true. I will use the solution 40, 100. If we substitute these values in, then we have 200 times 40 plus 500 times 100 is less than or equal to 100,000. $200 times 40 becomes 8,000. 500 times 100 becomes 50,000. And 8,000 plus 50,000 becomes 58,000. They want us to explain what this represents in this situation. Planting 40 acres of soybeans and 100 acres of wheat would cost $58,000 which is less than the $100,000 budget. If you have any questions about how to solve this practice problem, please use class time to ask for further clarification before we move forward. Our next practice problem says, Elena is ordering dried chili peppers and corn husks for her cooking class. Chili peppers cost $16.95 per pound, and corn husks cost $6.49 per pound. Elena spends less than $50 on D pounds of dried chili peppers and H pounds of corn husks. Here is a graph that represents the situation. Number 1, write an inequality that represents this situation. So as we try to put together this inequality, first let's notice that chili peppers cost $16.95 per pound, and that the letter D is going to represent pounds of dried chili peppers. So when we write this, we would write 16.95 D. This is taking the $16.95 and multiplying it by the pounds of dried chili peppers. Next, we see that corn husks cost $6.49 per pound, and the H is going to represent the pounds of corn husks. So here we would write 6.49 H, and that says we're going to take the $6.49 and we're going to multiply it by the pounds of corn husks. Next, we see that she spends less than $50, so that means we have only less than 50. And we see that she spends that less than $50 on some amount of dried chili peppers and some amount of corn husks. So that means we're going to add those prices together. So this inequality represents the situation if we find the price for the dried chili peppers and we find the price for the corn husks, we can add them together and it's less than 50. Now number 2 says, can Elena purchase 2 pounds of dried chili peppers and 4 pounds of corn husks and spend less than $50? Explain your reasoning. For this, we want to look at the graph they've given us. We're going to go right to 2 pounds of dried chili peppers, and then we're going to go up to 4 pounds of corn husks. So we have this point right here, 2, 4. This means no, because the point 2, 4 is not in the shaded solution area. When we're looking at this graph, every point in the blue shaded region is a solution. That combination of dried chilies and corn husks will be less than $50. The dashed line, acting as a boundary, tells us we are not accepting any points on the line because that would make it exactly $50. And all of the unshaded area would not be solutions because those combinations would make it cost more than $50. Next, we'll look at number 3. Can Elena purchase 1.5 pounds of dried chili peppers and 3 pounds of corn husks and spend less than $50? Explain your reasoning. So again, we'll look at the graph. We'll go right to 1.5 pounds of dried chilies. We'll go up to 3 corn husks or pounds of corn husks, and we'll put our point. Now, it appears that we are in the shaded region, but it's really close, and we're using a point that's not on a crosshair. So just to verify, let's go ahead and substitute these in to our inequality. This would be 16.95 times 1.5 plus 6.49 times 3, and that would need to be less than 50. So 16.95 times 1.5 is 25.425. $6.49 times 3 is 1947. And when we add these together, we get 44.895 so that verifies our belief that that point is in the blue shaded region. Our last practice problem asks, which inequality is represented by the graph? So what we need to do is pick a point in the blue shaded region and see which inequality it makes true. If you look at the choices, we have two differences to look at. A and B are both 4x minus 2y. C and D are both 4x plus 2y. And the other choice is these are either going to be greater than 12 or less than 12. So my favorite point to try is the origin, 0.00. So let's try that in both of these variations on the left and see what we get. 4x, which would be 4 times 0, minus 2y, which would be 2 times 0. We know that 4 times 0 is 0. Negative 2 times 0 is 0. And this is going to become 0. So we know that 0 is less than 12. That means we can get rid of choice A. Next, let's try it in the other variation on the left. 4x, which we're letting be 0, plus 2y, which we're letting be 0. Again, 4 times 0 is 0. 2 times 0 is 0. And 0 plus 0 is 0. We know that 0 is less than 12, so we can get rid of choice C. So this point helped us narrow it down to either B or D. So we're going to need to pick another point in the blue shaded area and test it to see if we can find which one it is. So I'm just going to pick another point, and I'm going to use 2, 2. So let's try it in these. That would be 4 times 2 minus 2 times 2. 4 times 2 is 8. Negative 2 times 2 is minus 4. 8 minus 4 is 4, and 4 is less than 12. So the answer could still be choice B. Let's try it in the other option. 4 times x, which is 2, plus 2 times y, which is also 2. 4 times 2 is 8. 2 times 2 is 4. And 8 plus 4 is 12. 12 equals 12. So that could not make D correct, because D says it should be less than 12. So that eliminates choice D, meaning B is the correct inequality, represented by this graph. If you have any questions about how to solve any of these practice problems from Lesson 23, please use class time to ask for further clarification before we move forward.